Hello. Welcome, friends of Ethereum, friends of Ether's Phoenix. I'm Jonas. I'm leading the RetroPGF effort at the Optimism Foundation. 2 years ago, we shared this concept of retroactive public goods funding. Today, I want to talk to you about what we've done in these last 2 years, a bit of intuition about how retroactive public goods funding works, and how you can help to summon Ether's Phoenix. Cool, so 2 years ago at ETC, the Optimism team, together with Vitalik, published this concept of retroactive public goods funding. Show of hands, who has read this article? Hey, that is wonderful. Cool, who here has heard of retroactive public goods funding? Wow, what a high context crowd, wonderful. Okay, who really thinks public goods are good? Maybe we get everyone? Okay, some don't believe yet, maybe you believe soon. Great, so 2 years into it, a lot has happened. Just reiterating on this core problem statement, I think there are a lot of great talks about why public goods are important. I think there are more inspirational speakers that can really pill you on why public goods are good. But if you already believe this, we believe public goods are good, but we're missing sustainable ways to fund them. And we're missing effective resource allocation tools. And this is the optimistic approach to this. We try to solve both things, sustainable funding for public goods and an effective resource allocation to fund and incentivize the creation of public goods. We have this beautiful flywheel here where we have nice, useful OP block space. This is OP mainnet block space. This is block space of other OP chains, Zora, Base, the public goods network, many more to come. They generate revenue from sequencing the transactions, and part of this revenue is reinvested in financing public goods via retroactive public goods funding. And we believe public goods are really at the core of this network and this ecosystem, at the core of what makes this valuable. So we believe having a good public goods ecosystem provides a lot of value to users and builders. And this value results in more demand for OP block space, which results in more revenue, which results in more funding for public goods. And this is kind of this core flywheel that we're working on. So the big question is, how do we make this RetroPGF thing happen? How do we use it as an effective tool to get people to build for the public good? And the solution is retroactive, quadratic, impact cert, conviction, non-plutocratic, collusion-resistant, AI-aligned, ZK public goods funding. Hey! RQICNCRAZPGF. Just kidding. It's sometimes working in these systems for a few years, we get like super nerd sniped and hyper obsessed with our own systems, and we invent our own vocabulary, and then we go home for Christmas and we talk to our mom and we're like, Mom, retroactive, impact cert, conviction, non-plutocratic, etc. public goods funding is going to change the world, and nobody has an idea what you're talking about. So a really simple breakdown of what we're doing here with retro funding is we're creating a mechanism to incentivize the production of goods and services that a community wants. So commonly, as you all know about RetroPGF, we think about this nice aspect that if we look into the past and we reward kind of the impact that we measured, so we reward what we all agree was useful in the past, that is much more effective and efficient than if we try to predict what's useful in the future. So this is kind of the first nice property of this mechanism. But what we're really trying to do with retroactive funding is we try to incentivize behaviors. We're trying to incentivize people to build public goods and services that we as a community want. So in the absence of classical free market forces providing these goods and services, we kind of are creating our own market around creating these services. And this is at the core of what we're doing. And this is not a new idea. So often we come around here, we outline these really novel concepts, and we really pretend like we're reinventing the wheel here, but this is quite a well-established concept that we're leveraging. And what we're really trying to do is like take this concept into like a new dimension to become the core economic mechanism that we build ecosystems on. So somebody even like shared an article with me from like 1908 where they had the first mention of retroactive funding. So it's actually super old and like nothing that we're reinventing. I think some examples to build some intuitions of like what are retroactive funding mechanisms you're interacting with daily is like think of every prize competition that is repeated as a retroactive funding mechanism. Every hackathon bounty, every hackathon prize, every regular prize competition is essentially seeing what was useful and giving you a reward based on how useful it was. If you think of something like Spotify, something that most of you are interacting with daily, this is a retro funding mechanism. I don't think anybody's claiming this is working super well, fund your artists. But what it's doing, right, it's measuring how many people have played the song, and it's rewarding the song owners, the IP owners, based on how often the song was played, right? So we're really not like reinventing or like inventing a new concept. We're applying an existing concept of rewarding behavior that we want to see to drive the creation of goods and services that we want. And this is a continuous experiment. So I think in socio-economic mechanisms, theory is always very sexy and beautiful, and then execution can be super messy. So somebody had like a nice meme on their slide, which was like thinking about DAOs, and it was like really, really beautiful rainbow. And the other was like being in a DAO, and it was really sad. So this is the problem here. We always have these beautiful concepts about like these socioeconomic systems, and then when we actually bring them to the world, people interact with them, this behavior is like hard to predict. So to actually make this mechanism work, to make it drive public goods production, we need to stay really close to the ground and iterate on the design of these rounds really fastly. And this is what we're doing. So this is the part of what did we do in the last 2 years. We shipped 2 rounds of retroactive public goods funding. The first round we did in October of 2021. And this was 58 projects. We wanted to fund Ethereum and Optimism public goods. We had 21 voters who decided on the distribution of this funding. These voters are early Optimism citizens. So we're powered by a bicameral governance system where Optimism citizens are supposed to represent core users of the platform. I'm not going to go into this. This bicameral governance system is really interesting. Justine is talking about this on Friday. I would definitely recommend jumping into this. It's like a super interesting governance topic. But yeah, these citizens vote on the distribution of funding, and we learned a lot. I'm not going to go into all the things we learned. Just one key takeaway is this idea of impact equals profit. Often in public goods discussions, if you're in the green-pilled field, we get into this rabbit hole of defining public goods by this classical economic definition, and then we're like, is this a public good? Is this not a public good? And you get into like an endless discussion of like, does it fit that definition? And we found that this conversation was actually not that useful to what we want to achieve. What we're actually trying to do is we're trying to ensure that all the impact generated by contributors to Optimism is fairly compensated with profit to these individuals. And this gives us like a nice North Star to aim for, which is even if you ship something and you're able to extract some value, earn some rewards from it. For instance, let's say the Bankless podcast has ads, but we might see that the Bankless podcast provides much more value than they're able to generate from these ads. And if that's the case, we want to use retro funding to align this impact and profit ratio. This is a big thing that we learned from round 1 of RetroPGF. Vitalik wrote a whole long blog post about it if you want to rabbit hole and get nerd sniped. Round 2 is what we closed in March of this year. We had 10 million OP tokens, 195 projects, 71 voters, and what we tried to do is reward contributions that supported the development and adoption of the OP stack. And one big takeaway, and this was done in March, it was quite manual. We tried to really stay on our feet and execute on this round rather than trying to build the perfect system. And one thing that we found is that we need to be way better at collecting data on impact and profit. So all these contributions to optimism, be it in education, be it tooling, be it infrastructure, we want to understand way better what impact has this contribution provided, what impact has this tool provided, and how much profit have these contributors been able to earn from these contributions already. And based on these learnings, we're shipping round 3 of RetroPGF. This is happening this fall. 30 million OP tokens to contributions that support the development and adoption of optimism. It's coming. You can build for it. Before we get into it, this is how messy it looks if you try to visualize 195 projects and the payouts. Just putting this up, I think you can't even read it. Just to give you an intuition of what are some of the projects in these categories. It's everyone from Protocol Guild, Geth, Solidity, Nethermind, the Beacon Chain Explorer. We have Open Zeppelin and tooling. We have the Common Stack. We have Solidity. We have Type Chain. We have such a diverse set of projects that were funded. And we're actually seeing how this effect is kicking in, how it's changing behavior. And this is what we want to see happen. Some quotes here. A good one from Andre from Crypto Zombies is, their team doesn't have a stable source of income, and RetroPGF allows them to retain their talent and focus on building more courses. I personally am a big Crypto Zombies fan. This is how I got into Solidity. And I think this is exactly what we want to see. We want to see teams being able to focus on providing more impact instead of worrying about how they can get more funding. Round 3 is happening. Here we go again. These are the 4 categories of things you can do to receive retro funding in round 3. This is the part of how you can summon Ether's Phoenix. So we have 4 categories of things, of the contributions to optimism that will be rewarded. This is everything from the OP stack, the infrastructure underpinning optimism, to the developer ecosystem. Everything that supports developers in building these beautiful on-chain, decentralized applications. So everything from documentation, APIs, services like oracles is eligible to receive retro funding. Even things that support the adoption of end users. So think of all the wallets you interact with, onboarding tools, education, even some of the applications you interact with are eligible to receive retro funding. So if you're building something, if you have a great idea in mind of what you can build, likelihood is it fits in that framework. And if you're building it and it relates to optimism, you can apply to receive retro funding for the impact your product or service has. If you don't have an idea of what you're working on, you can go to the ecosystem contributions board. It's a repo under the Optimism GitHub. We have around like 80 ideas of things that we think might be impactful to build. Measure your impact if you're building something. Try to understand, like, how can you understand how useful this is? How much impact is it generating? How many users do you have? How many people use your education tool? Go to your hackathon. Leverage your Oracle in their project. Try to measure your impact, because if you don't, somebody else will do it for you. This is probably not what you want. Cool, I think I'm running out of time. So to summon Ether's Phoenix, you want to build public goods, you want to help us improve retroactive public goods funding, and then Ether's Phoenix will ensure that all impact and profit is equalized. Build for a public good. Optimism is not a roll-up. Optimism is an update to capitalism. Thank you.
Let's take 1 or 2 questions. Hey, Jonas, thanks for the overview. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about optimizing the process for applicants and the voting process for this upcoming round.
Sure. I think we learned a lot on this from last round. Specifically, I think last round, the biggest pain points for project was like, they were not aware that this is happening. So we're working on spreading more awareness. The other part was we didn't support them well in writing good applications that help voters. This also hurt voters. So we asked them really loose questions and we got really loose answers. And this wasn't really helpful for voters to understand the past impact of projects. So what we're doing this time around is for this project sign up, help projects to provide way more information, way more data sources on what they're doing, so voters are able to way more accurately assess the kind of impact the project has generated.
Can you talk about the voting process?
Yes, the voting process. So in the last round, we had 69 people that submitted votes. We aggregated all of them via simple average. So they distributed their voting power on a number of projects. I think the median voter voted on 45 projects. And yes, we did it. It was Griff, for instance, here in the audience was a voter. It was quite a painful voting experience. It was like going over 195 projects listed in a long form. So what we're doing this time around is we're actually shipping a nice user interface for you to submit your votes.
Thank you, Jonas.
Thank you.